Welcome into the I-80 Boys College Football Show. We got a little Ohio State versus Oregon preview for you today. I'll start us off here with Ohio State. Look, Ohio State, is probably got to be one of the best teams in college football right now, right? They dismantled Iowa at home last week, and they're going to look do the same thing this week against Oregon. Will Howard, he's been extremely efficient, Chris. He's put up 1,300 yards and 16 touchdowns so far. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, who have they played? It doesn't matter. He's still been efficient where he needs to be, so that's pretty good. We talk a lot about Ryan Williams at Alabama, but Jeremiah Smith has 473 yards and 7 total touchdowns on the year. Don't forget about Emeka Egbuka. He's got another 433 yards and 5 touchdowns as well. One of the better receiver rooms in the country. To me, running back room, one of the best in the country as well. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, those two just simply get it done as a 1-2 backfield there. Oregon, to me, Chris, they're going to be the best defense that Ohio State's played up to this point. Iowa was still pretty good, though. I get it. It was kind of a boring game to watch. Halftime, a lot of Ohio State fans were probably pretty fired up about it. They came out in the second half and dismantled Iowa, though. To me, this game comes down to Will Howard and can he continue playing efficiently? In other words, don't turn the ball over. If he starts turning the ball over in this one, giving Oregon those chances, it might be a long day for Ohio State. On the other side of the ball, Ohio State, again, top 3 on defense. Oregon's looked like they have taken steps back offensively, and Chris is going to kind of touch on that, especially in the red zone there. I don't want to go too far into it, but the problem I see in this game, Oregon ranks 66 in rushing offense, and Ohio State just held Iowa, a top 10 rushing attack, by the way, in check, which I think forces Dylan Gabriel to try and win this one, which kind of works in Ohio State's favor. To me, Ohio State, they're a top 10 at shutting down opponents' attacks. Again, one of the top 3 or 4 defense in the country on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State. Chris, with that being said, I'll throw it over to you. Tell me a little more about Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon, we know they're 5-0. They beat Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State. Starting Big Ten play, they knocked off UCLA. And then last week, I believe it was a Friday night game, I watched the whole entirety of that. Against Michigan State, they won 31-10 there. I'll talk about that game in a minute after I go through some stats here, Christian. But offensively, you touched on it a little bit. They average 35 points per game, which isn't terrible. It's 32nd in the country. They're 19th in total offense, 19th in passing offense, and 67th in rushing offense. Now, Dylan Gabriel, this kid's played a ton of football. He's 130 of 167 on the year. He's almost got 1,500 yards. The impressive completion percentage there was 77.8. He's got 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Now, he did throw 2 big interceptions in that Michigan State game as Oregon was about ready to score. Kind of boneheaded throws, to be completely honest with you. He's got to clean that up against a great Ohio State defense this week. But like I said, the running game, Jordan James, he played awesome last week. That kid had like 166 yards on the ground on 24 carries. He's got 88 carries for the year, though, 552 yards with 5 touchdowns on the season. So, and then their big play wide receiver, everybody knows who it is. It's Tez Johnson. I think he's their all-time leading receiver there now. He's got 43 catches on the year for 395 yards and 5 touchdowns. Trayshawn Holden, that's the other guy on the outside. And then they got Terrence Ferguson, the tight end. These guys are pretty damn good weapons as well. You touched on it. Oregon's one of the more balanced teams in the country, especially on offense. And then on the defensive side, they're 10th in total defense. So, I mean, that's one thing about Dan Lanning in his time there at Oregon. He's really improved the defensive side of the ball. They give up 17 points per game, which is 21st in the country. They only give up 162 through the air so far, which is 18th in the country. And like I said, they're great on the ground. And that'll be interesting because that whole matchup, like you talked about with Ohio State's running backs, Oregon only gives up 101 yards per game on the ground. So that's something's got to give in this one, Christian. This game, before I give my prediction here, Christian, I took Oregon to win this game before the season started. Just, I'm very, very high on Oregon, or I was anyway. I've kind of changed my role a little bit. Oregon, to me, reminds me of a few other teams out in the country so far this year. They haven't played a complete game all season. They looked really bad against Idaho. They didn't look that great against Boise State. Yes, they beat Oregon State, UCLA, Michigan State, but a lot of that was second half play, and I'd like to see out of an Oregon team and a Dan Lanning-led team play a complete game. On the other side, I would say Ohio State's struggled at times this season, like you touched on, But right now, they look like the better team. They just do. Now, I know people are going to say in the comment section, Christian, well, who has Ohio State played? And they'll break down a bunch of stats on all these teams that nobody cares about. But at the end of the day, not to rattle on here, Christian, I got Ohio State 27, Oregon 24. I think this game is going to be very close. I know it's played in Oregon. If it was played in Ohio State right now, Ohio State would be a touchdown favorite, by the way. They're a 4-point favorite currently. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on the prediction on this game, Christian.
Yeah, I've got Ohio State 28, Oregon 21. I mean, very similar thing that you're saying, Chris. I mean, Oregon has really struggled, I feel like, to start this year off. I get it. Ohio State, they're going to say, well, who have they played? Well, Iowa, we know, is a decent-ish team, right? They have their own faults on the offensive side of the ball, so it's kind of hard to really gauge them there. But I would say outside of that, Michigan State, what really is Michigan State this year? Outside of Aiden Childs and Jonathan Smith, what is that team really? We're still trying to figure that out. With Oregon, the thing that I don't like is they have struggled inside of the red zone, and offensively, they look like they have regressed compared to Bo Nix and some of these other guys that they've had. They're under the Dan Lanning tenure. Again, this is a primetime matchup. This is a situation where last year, when you look at how Oregon did against Washington, and I understand, hey, it's a whole different thing, a whole different concept. To me, Ohio State's a more complete team than Washington was last year, and this is a worse version of that Oregon team compared to what they were last year. So just looking at it, yeah, I've got Ohio State in this one. Hopefully it's not like last week and we don't get a repeat of some major upsets.